Hello everyone, welcome back to another video here on Cluiche with me, Seamus, Brady, your host, and for this one I'm joined once again by Aaron Prendergast, the man behind Gaelic Games Fan TV. We are going to give a run through of the All-Ireland Hurling Final of 2023. Once again, it has a familiar feel to it, Aaron. All the crazy scenarios, all the potential matchups, but we've ended up at the same spot once again. Limerick and Kilkenny in the All-Ireland Hurling Final of 2023. And this is the full preview. And eventually we're going to put our necks on the line and give a prediction. But first of all, how are you feeling about this All-Ireland final? As I said, same pairing as last year. What are you making of it?
Yeah, looking forward to it hugely. The game last year was one of the games of the year, games of the decade. I know we're still early into the decade, but it was an absolute cracker of a game between Kilkenny and Limerick. It was just full throttle from both sides, end to end, both sides giving absolutely everything. And it was kind of harsh, to think Kilkenny scored 226 and still lost, which was absolutely mental. Do you know what I mean? I think they scored it was one of the highest tallies ever in a final of an All-Ireland. Regardless of even losing or winning, it was one of the highest tallies ever, and they lost. Do you know what I mean? It shows how mental of a final that was, that a tally like that, they could still lose. But
it was the type of final that made me realise just how good Limerick were, if you get what I mean. That Kilkenny were that good and still couldn't beat them.
Yeah, it was and it goes to show anything. I know Clare beat Limerick in the round robin, but any team has thrown at Limerick in a knockout championship game or a big championship game where something has mattered since 2019 when Kilkenny beat Limerick. Limerick have just found an answer, and sometimes it's been maybe through a bit of luck, but a lot of the time it's through Paul Connor, John Coyley switching things with tactics. Cathal O'Neill coming in at the right time, moving Kyle Hayes to wing back, Cian Lynch starting, for the first time in a big championship game since his injury a couple of years ago. So it's just big in big games and big moments, Limerick tend to deliver, and I think that's been the difference between them and a lot of other sides. And I think for the likes of Kilkenny, Clare, Galway, all have hugely talented players, but when it comes down to winning All-Irelands, it comes down to the clutch moments, and Limerick time and time again have been able to do that on more than one occasion. And yeah, that was ultimately the difference between because you couldn't say Kilkenny were poor last year because both sides were absolutely brilliant. It was just Limerick were just better, and that's the thing. They just, no matter what way the team they play, well, no matter what standard they play at, Limerick will find an extra gear somewhere in them.
Oh, and they have consistently. And I think the way that I feel would be good to kind of do this preview is to look at the 2 years that both of them have had kind of separate and how they've got to this point. So obviously Limerick, when you're talking about finding an answer, the obvious one, and I've spoke about this on numerous episodes now, the obvious moment where I was like, okay, no, they're not going down, was the Tipperary game. Because they've been beaten by Clare, sorry. They hadn't looked impressive against Waterford. And the Clare defeat, if you remember the narrative around then, the minute they lost to Clare, all of a sudden it was Limerick could go out with the Munster Championship here. And they got Tipperary, and Tip had them on the ropes, especially going into the last few minutes. And what I remember watching that game, and I don't mean this in any sort of a disrespectful way, Limerick were playing so badly in the last 10 minutes, but they were so determined, which was a mad combination of the two. It was they were winning every puck out, but missing every chance, but they were still then winning the next puck out. And they were just not giving up, even though they didn't bring their shooting boots at all. And the fact is that by hook or by crook, they got something out of that game. And I was thinking in my head, if there was ever a moment to collapse, that would have been the moment. And they didn't.
Absolutely.
And that's why, in my head, I'm thinking, that's why I picked them to beat Galway quite handy, because I was saying the confidence that must have given them to everything that they went through in the Munster Championship, they still came out champions.
Absolutely, yeah. And there was times, as you said, in Munster, where they look on, even against Cork, they looked beaten, they looked finished. There was a time where they were going out of it, and it's been a mad season for Limerick, because to think when they won obviously on the final day against Cork on the Munster Championship, before the final, they weren't even supposed to be in the final. If Tipperary had beaten Waterford, it would have been Tipperary Clare. And I think some people forget that Limerick had some serious jeopardy going into the final stages of the Munster Championship. And you know, like, it hasn't been perfect for them. They've had injuries. Sean Finn has obviously been out. They've had to obviously get Mike Casey back in, and they've had to move Dan Morrissey back to full back or back to cornerback, and they've had to sort of shuffle things around and sort of get used to things again. And they've obviously had, like, there was periods where Aaron Gillan was coming out of side, Gerard Hegarty was coming out of side. Maybe certain players weren't performing to the standard that we've seen them in previous years. But when push comes to shove and when the going gets tough, that's always when we've seen the best of this Limerick team, in my opinion. You think of Tipperary a couple of years ago in the Munster final, I think 2021, they were, I think, 10 points down at half-time, and they were on the ropes. They were looking like they were going to get beat. And then they turned it on. They turned it on in the second half and just absolutely blew them away. And that's the thing with this Limerick side, is that when it gets tough, they find an answer. They go 4 or 5 points down against Galway, and then they wake up and they just turn it on. And you know, like, that performance against Galway was just, it was their best performance of the year so far, in my opinion, because, like I was saying to you off air, it was like poetry in motion. Like, everything was just working perfectly. The flicks were working positionally. They knew where each other were. The hand passes, the flicks off the wrist and everything. Like, everything was just perfect. The stick work was brilliant. And obviously a lot of their big performers produced as well. Gillan, Hegarty, Lynch, all produced top class performances. And from a Limerick perspective, like, it's, you know, there are so many comparisons maybe with Dublin's 6 in a row side, with the fact that they just turn up in these big moments time and time again. Even if they've been poor for the majority of the game, they'll turn up in these big moments. And you know, it's a test of the character of the team, test of the mentality of the manager, and it's a testament to the mentality of Paul Kinnerk as well, like, to everyone, like, the fact that they find an answer. And majority of the time you're watching as well, and you're like, how have they done that? I actually don't know. And to be fair, only John Coyley, Paul Kinnerk, and the Limerick backroom team know what they're doing half the time, because you look at it and you think, I honestly don't know how they've actually turned that around. And it's testament to how good of a team that they are.
Oh, look, they're an awesome team, and I genuinely mean that. It's a good comparison, the Limerick with the Dublin. It really is, and like, it's in terms of dominance. And that semi-final performance was a champagne performance. That was very similar to Dublin's All-Ireland semi-final victory over Mayo in 2019, or over Tyrone in 2017. And one where just everything just makes sense. Oh, we are this good. Like, that was just, they were awesome in that semi-final. And I was there and watching them live. They're just an awesome team. Like, they're just so good. And which brings you on to the next. You're talking about the panel depth. Now, going into this game, of course, now we know that Declan Hannon has been out. We know that Sean Finn has been out. But the point is, we made at the start was, it was inches last time. It was inches. Do Sean Finn and Declan Hannon take inches off how good Limerick are compared to what they were last year?
They should do. You would think that they would. You would look at it and think individually, Declan Hannon, like, all-time brilliant captain. You know, he's been phenomenal for Limerick in the last couple of years. Sean Finn, one of the best cornerbacks in the game in the last couple of seasons as well. Like, you take both of those two players out of most teams, and they probably wouldn't even make a semi-final. Do you know that way? Like, they'd struggle. But the thing is with Limerick is that the sum of their team is bigger than any individual. And I think they seem to, like, they push Gerard Hegarty back to wing back, and he makes it, you know, a huge difference. Took a while to grow into the game, but he was absolutely phenomenal. Dan Morrissey obviously moving back to cornerback, where he played obviously a couple of years ago in 2021. So, like, they seem to find a way, and they'll find more options in their team. Like against Clare, for example, going down the home stretch, when it looked like Clare were starting to pull it back, David Reedy comes on, hits 3 points. You've got Cathal O'Neill coming off the bench, making an impact. Like Colin Coughlin as well. You've just so many options in this Limerick side, and that's the thing, is that, for, like, you would look at it and think, losing Declan Hannon and Sean Finn, like, it definitely is a huge loss. Don't get me wrong; it does make Limerick a weaker team, but I think they still find ways and they still find an answer, and they'll still have a game plan. Do you know that way? Like, and I think for Kilkenny, it's even more to think about, because, like, at least going into the game, if you know Declan Hannon's playing there at centre back, you know, okay, you're going to put an Owen Cody in the half forward line. Maybe he's going to go on him, or Adrian Mullen's going to be there. But now it's like, do Limerick stick with Gerard Hegarty at wing back, or do they try something different? And that's the thing. It does
That's
get
a
Derek
great
Ling
point. I didn't
thinking
even I
even
didn't even
more, you
think
know?
about that. That's a great point
Yeah.
because make no mistake about it, Kilkenny would have been planning for what to do with Declan Hannon, a centre half back. And now you could have someone like a Kyle Hayes there or William O'Donoghue who plays the position so much more differently than Declan Hannon does.
Yeah.
So like
That's it, yeah.
didn't even think about that.
Yeah, like yeah, and that's the thing. Like Kilkenny will have so much to think about, like in those regards. Like, and obviously they've played Dan Morrissey at cornerback for the majority of the season, so he'll probably slot in there. But there is a lot to think about because like obviously with Cian Lynch, he started the last day and he was phenomenal. Like he grew into the game the more it goes on, but like Limerick just have so much depth in their panel. Like Cathal O'Neill's been knocking on the door for a long time to get into the side now to be a starting 15. Keeps coming off the bench, giving cameo performances. He keeps producing. A kind of, to throw back to Dublin again, it reminds me a bit of Costello when he was first coming into Dublin. He was producing so many good performances off the bench. Had to wait a long time before he established himself in the starting 15. And with Cathal O'Neill, like he's chomping at the bit, and like that's the thing with Limerick. Like when you have such competition for places, like Aaron Glan, Hegarty, Lynch, Tom Morrissey, they all know if they have an off day, you've got Cathal O'Neill just waiting to come in. Someone like Stephen O'Brien as well. You've so many great players, David Reedy, all just waiting to come into the side, and that's what gives Limerick. Look, Kilkenny have a huge depth in their panel as well, but that's what gives Limerick a huge advantage as well over other teams, I think.
Oh, for sure. And then, you were mentioning about Limerick's management team. You were mentioning about how good they are. We mentioned about their bench. Let's do the same with Kilkenny. So, like running through Kilkenny's whole year. So, obviously, they beat Westmeath and Antrim, then drew with Galway, then beat Dublin, lost to Wexford in a crazy game where Wexford saved their senior status. Then they beat Galway in the Leinster final with the last puck of the game and beat Clare in a thriller in the All-Ireland semi-final. So they are unbeaten in the championship so far. Nobody's put them to the sword quite yet. Galway very much nearly did in that Leinster final, but Buckley strikes it into the back of the net. Obviously, a man who will be a busy man this weekend, a wedding and an All-Ireland hurling final. Not a bad weekend for himself. But on Kilkenny's management team, the point is I'm saying, Derek Ling's first year in charge. And that's a massive difference from last year's All-Ireland hurling final. It's not Brian Cody on the line. It's Derek Ling. Mm-hmm. His first All-Ireland final. It's been his first year in charge. What do you think he will feel like going into this game against a management team like John Kiley, Paul Konerk, etc.?
Yeah, I think he'll want to prove a point, because I think a lot of people probably still look at Derek Ling as, the year to Brian Cody, and everyone still looks at, obviously Brian Cody's the best, the best manager in the history of probably the GAA and certainly in the sport of hurling. Look, Sean Kiley certainly catching them up, in terms of managers and in terms of All-Ireland wins and everything else. But I think Derek Ling will want to prove a point. He'll want to prove, look, I'm the one, I'm the man in charge now. And there's plenty of other good Kilkenny men knocking about who might be interested in this job in the next couple of years, I'm sure. So, and there's obviously this train of thought, when you look in soccer around like that, the man to follow Ferguson or the man to follow Arsene Wenger around like that, those didn't really work. And, you can look at that the same in the GAA a lot of the time, but at the same time, look at the people who followed Mickey Hart, won an All-Ireland with Tyrone in their first season. So it doesn't always work that way. And to be fair to Derek Ling, he's got a phenomenal team. They're similar to Limerick in some ways. They just don't die. They just never lie down. It's almost like this DNA that's within Kilkenny to not lie down in the coming moments or going into the final couple of minutes. And that's the thing, is that, even if Limerick are in front, you don't be surprised if Kilkenny somehow draw it back and make a fist out of the game. You were looking at the last day, Killian Buckley obviously coming on in the Leinster final, getting that late goal. But you've got players like Billy Drennan or Walter Walsh or Richie Reid that can all come on. Kilkenny have got some panel, really. They've probably nearly got a better overall panel, I would say, than Limerick in terms of the actual amount of options that they can bring off the bench. But I do still think Limerick starting 15 is better, and I think midfield defensively, I think they're stronger as well. But I think, yeah, Kilkenny have some panel, in fairness, the amount of options they have. Even adding the likes of Billy Drennan into the side this year, Adrian Mullen back from injury as well. And that's before even mentioning Owen Cody or TJ Reid. So, yeah, it's been they've a wealth of options in their panel, to be honest with you.
For sure. And then you were mentioning about the bench. One player that I want to talk to you about coming off the bench, and I've witnessed him now in 2 games coming on consistently and making big impacts, Walter Walsh. Against Galway, he came on, made a huge impact. Against Clare, he came on and made a huge impact. Against Limerick in 2019, he came off the bench and changed the game because he was able to catch ball against that defence and made a huge impact. Surely he has a huge role to play in this game as well.
Absolutely, yeah. Like, I mean, it's mad that he's still going. He's still coming on. He's still making a difference. He's still coming off the bench, changing games, like you said before. And like that experience of having done it before, having been there in the big moments, it does stand to you. And it definitely does stand to someone like Walter Walsh and Kilkenny. And the fact they have that trump card there, the fact they know he's in the form that he's in, the fact they have him to come on going into the final 10, 20 minutes or 25 minutes, whatever it is huge, because like, who knows how this game is going to be going into the final 20 minutes. Is it going to be neck and neck? Are Limerick going to be a bit in front? Or Kilkenny going to be a bit in front? It's such a hard game to call in that way. And having someone like a Walter Walsh who could come on, Cian Kenny, Richie Reid, these lads, like, they could make a huge impact going down the home stretch for Kilkenny. And Walter Walsh, as you said before, has been phenomenal when he's come on.
Yeah, and to put a really direct question to you, we talked about Limerick's injuries. We talked about Kilkenny adding in players the likes of Billy Drennan, etc. Do Kilkenny have a better chance of beating Limerick this year than they did this time last year?
Yeah, I think they do, because I think, first of all, like, obviously they played Limerick. They finally got a crack at them since 2019. So they've
for
had.
the record, I agree with you. I think they have a better chance.
They have because you don't know what you're going up against really until you actually play it. Like, do you know what I mean? Or you actually played them. Like Kilkenny, they would have played Limerick in 2019, but Limerick were extremely off of that day. They were extremely flat. And even at that, like, Limerick, remember that sideline cut at the end of the game? They nearly turned it around. And like, that's the thing, is that they now have the experience of obviously having played Limerick. I think the fact that it's Derek Link's first year, the pressure is somewhat off as well, because I think with it being Brian Cody, there was this cloud, obviously, with Brian Cody and everything else. Everyone was saying, is this going to be his last final? Is this going to be his last chance to win the All-Ireland? Everything else, all the build-up that was going into it, everyone talking about Brian Cody, everything else. So again, I think that eliminates the pressure ever so slightly and takes the pressure maybe away from the players. They're not having to perform for Brian Cody maybe because it's his last season. You know, like that could have played into their train of thought coming into the game. And I think as well, their panel has gotten stronger. Like Billy Drennan coming in, Cian Kenny, the re-emergence of David Blanchfield. Like they have a stronger panel. And as you said, you've got Walter Walsh in good form, like we were saying before, and Adrian Mullen's now back from injury. I think they do have a stronger panel, and you combine that with the injuries of Hannon and Finn. I think Kilkenny definitely are coming in stronger than last year, in my opinion, because they also beat Clare. They beat Clare out the gate last year, and I don't think that really done them any favours. Like, not that they still performed to their absolute highest standards in the final, but would they have learned much from beating Clare in that semi-final? Probably not. Whereas at least this year, they'll have something more to work on, maybe defensively, and maybe even matchups wise as well.
Yeah, no, there's no doubt about that. Clare gave them a bigger test this year than they did last year, and that last-minute goal chance definitely would have, shook them a little bit. Owen Murphy pulling off the best save I think I've ever seen. I don't think that's an overstatement. Like, what a save to get Kilkenny into the All-Ireland Hurling Final again. And I mean, now that they are back here, as you're talking about this is my part of the preview that I look forward to the most. The matchups. Like, I mean, as you're talking about, both starting 15s have some genuinely unbelievable players going up against each other. What matchups are you looking forward to the most?
Yeah, well, I think it's going to be interesting, obviously, to see who picks up Grode Hegarty, in my opinion, because he's the All-Ireland final man. Like, he's the man who's always delivered in the All-Ireland final, and that's why it's interesting. Like, he obviously started at wing back the last day, do you play him there? Will be interesting. I know he's played there obviously at under 20 level and everything else, but the impact that he has playing, whether he's in the half forward line or the full forward line, is so crucial in All-Ireland finals. Like, he's delivered last year in the final, 2021, 2020. Like, he's always turned up. So it's just going to be interesting to see where he plays. And, you know, like, if he plays in the full forward line, you know, like, could Mikey Butler pick him up? You know, but then again, Mikey Butler would probably be the man to pick up Aaron Glan, you'd imagine. Hugh Lawler maybe goes on him. Like, there is so many fascinating matchups around. Like, around midfield is going to be such a strong area of the pitch as well. Like, William O'Donoghue, Conor Fogarty obviously in there as well. Like, Conor Fogarty's been an excellent former fellow for Kilkenny this year. And then who's going to pick up TJ Reid? Is that going to be Mike Casey, Dan Morrissey? Like, there's so much going on. But to be fair to Limerick, like, they never really, in my opinion, ever worry too much about the opposition. Like, they'll let TJ Reid do his thing. Like, for example, Tony Kelly always has brilliant games against Limerick. He always scores high amount and delivers, and that's because not that Limerick don't place emphasis on stopping the opposition. They obviously clearly do, but I think at the same time, Limerick will be so focused on what works for them, and they'll be so focused on playing their game, getting the ball into Hegarty, getting the ball into Galan, letting Keane Lynch do his thing. Because at the end of the day, last year, TJ Reid, Owen Cody, like, they all had phenomenal games, and it still wasn't enough to beat them. So I think for Limerick, they just need to focus on what they can do. And in my opinion, that should be enough.
Yeah, that's the thing. I think if the best Limerick turns up, I think they can beat everybody. I don't think anybody can beat them if the best Limerick turns up. And that's the question, is, can Kilkenny rattle them to a point where the best Limerick is not there? Because I think that's how they win the game. It is a great point. I think Limerick go out with a mentality of, we're going to try and score more than you rather than concede less. Like, they really are like, you do your thing. We don't care. We've got Lynch, we've got Galan, we've got Hegarty. We'll outscore you. I think the matchups I'm really looking forward to. I think Hugh Lawler will go on Galan, if I had to predict that. I think Mikey Butler will probably pick up Seamus Flanagan, I want to say. And Tommy Walsh will go on Casey. I think it would be interesting to see who goes and grow out Hegarty, because in last year's All-Ireland final, he just looked unplayable. And he had Paddy Deegan marking him. Does Paddy Deegan go on him again this time? It's really hard to say. Who does Richie Reid pick up, or does he play sweeper? Does Pádraig Walsh start, or does he play in the half-back line? It's really, really hard to call. David Blanchfield, will he go straight on to Tom Morrissey? Who goes on William O'Donoghue? Like, he's the midfield general. He's their Roy Keane. He's their guy that sets the standard in midfield. It's so hard to tell. And then on the other side, look, Sean Finn would have been on Owen Cody every day of the week. Now who is it going to be? And that's like a really, really hard one. The other one as well is, it's been a talking point for the whole summer about the Barry Nash tactic, about teams trying to stop him. Do you think that's vitally important for Kilkenny as well this time?
I think so, yeah, because like, you see the impact he makes bursting up the field from that cornerback role, like, and even like, it's one of that. But see, the problem is, like, because for years, I think, like last year, for example, there was so much emphasis on stopping Barry Nash. But I think what it was doing then as a result was freeing up Jeremy Burns a lot more, and he was having a lot more space at wing back, and he was able to do his thing. And I think, you know, he capitalized on that quite massively and won Hurler of the Year. So it's one of them where you focus so much on stopping Nash, then you've got Jeremy Burns, then you've maybe got Hegarty, then you've got all these, you know, crazy talented forwards to worry about. But I think Kilkenny will definitely need to do something on it, I think, in my opinion, like, because he did have such a huge influence on the game last year, and he does have such a huge influence breaking out with the ball from that position. And he is he's nearly the first point of attack for Limerick in some ways, because like, when Nicky Quaid will go short, he'll go to Nash every time, and then Nash will play it up the field, and then the attack starts from there. So everything kind of circles through him. So yeah, like, if you can cut off that supply chain, then obviously that would be crucial from a Kilkenny perspective. And yeah, like, who he does pick up and who goes on him, would be really, really interesting. Like, you know, is it TJ Reid? Like, that'd be like an extraordinary battle if it's them two who go up against each other. But at the same time, like, is TJ Reid going to track Barry Nash all the way up the field? Probably not. So they'll probably need to stick someone else on him as well. It's going to be really interesting.
It's Dan Morrissey.
Mm.
For me, I think Mike Casey will go on Kyogan. It's hard. Actually, it is a really hard one to call. It's very hard. It's ridiculously hard to call. Adrian Mullen as well is hugely important. And like the thing that I always agree with you is whenever I've been analysing Limerick over the last couple of years, I've always had this thing of when they're at their best, it's very much like when Limerick are at their best, it's very much pick your poison. Do you want to flood the midfield like Waterford did in the All-Ireland semi-final in 21? Cool. Your forwards will be starved of possession. They won't get any good ball in. We'll absolutely dominate you from defence. And Dermot Burns and Kyle Hayes will pop over scores all day long. And Barry Nash will pop over scores all day long. Okay, you want to go man-to-man? Cool. We've got the best team in the country. Garrod Hegarty, Keane Lynch, Aaron Gallan, they'll run amok if you leave them one-on-one inside. So it's very much it's a very hard case to crack when they're at their best. So can Kilkenny knock them off their best, and how?
Yeah, I think when you look at the game against 2019, they stifled Limerick from the get-go, and they just completely they were chasing them time and time again. They were turning them over, they were winning balls. But again, Limerick at that stage were not they weren't developed into the team that they are now. They obviously had won the All-Ireland the year previous, but there probably was somewhat of a hangover ever so slightly, it was their first All-Ireland in 45 years. And, Kilkenny just caught them completely flat-footed. But, a few things that stood out from that game was the intensity in their tackling and the amount of pressure they were putting on the Limerick fullbacks when they had the ball. Limerick just weren't allowed play that game where they're trying to run it through the lines. And you see Limerick play this game where it's short hand passes, flicks off the wrist, just quick flicks and everything else, and then everyone just sort of converging into the space. And Kilkenny just stopped that time and time again. And likes of Cody that day, Owen Cody was phenomenal, TJ Reid were phenomenal. So it's a hard one though, because Limerick are a much more developed team now. They're far better. They're a much more serious team now. And you've seen when Limerick were at their best against Kilkenny last year, and Kilkenny were at their best, it still wasn't enough to stop them. So that's why I think Kilkenny, you might see them go a bit more conservative. You might see them try and place more emphasis on stopping Limerick as much as obviously doing what they can do at the other end. Because they have the forwards to hurt Limerick, and they have the forwards to turn Limerick over and to rip that defence to shreds. The question will be, can they stop Limerick at what Limerick do? And when the goings got tough and when it's come down to the melting pot in the last 4 years, nobody has been able to do that. And will they play a sweeper in there like Richie Reid or someone of that nature? Pádraig Walsh maybe to come in. It's going to be interesting, but at the same time, from a Derek Ling perspective, you don't want to change what's worked all year. Do you know that way? And you don't want to place too much emphasis on stopping Limerick, and then your forwards have an off day all of a sudden. So it's so fascinating. And for Derek Ling, I'd imagine he's probably not getting any sleep coming into this.
Oh, it is the test. It is the biggest test. And that's my point, is when I was talking about everything they went through Munster and they still came out as champions, the confidence they must have from that must be unshakable. Which then, of course, I don't know if you can hear in the background, but there's a window open beside me and there's a hell of a lot of seagulls outside. Don't know if you can hear that coming through on the Airstream. But apologies if that is the case. But coming down to it, All-Ireland Hurling Final preview and prediction from yourself. What are you thinking? All-Ireland Hurling Final 2023. What are you thinking?
Yeah, I think it's so hard to back against Limerick, isn't it? It's just you won't back against them until they're actually beaten in an All-Ireland final, and they're just not slowing down. There's no way. I know they don't have Declan Hannon. I know they're missing Sean Finn, but as you said, with William O'Donoghue coming into that centre back role, and obviously, Barry Nash, Mike Casey playing a cornerback, Dan Morrissey in a fullback. They don't they're all the sum of their parts is just bigger than any individual, in my opinion. And when you have Cathal O'Neill, who can make an impact, maybe coming off the bench, David Reedy as well, Like, I just think Limerick will be too strong. And when they get going and play the stuff that Limerick play, I just don't see how Kilkenny will be able to contain them and stop them in those free-flowing moments. And the fact that, like, if Limerick hadn't have produced what they produced against Galway, you'd maybe say, right, well, Kilkenny have maybe progressed since last year. And you could argue Limerick have maybe regressed because of the fact that they got beat by Clare in the championship. But like, Limerick just have far too many ways to hurt Kilkenny from 1 to 15. You look at Gerard Heggart, he's done it time and time again in finals. He's going to have a say. Aaron Glan has been in hurler of the year form. He's been absolutely sensational. Tom Morrissey, Shamie Flanagan, Cian Lynch is now back in the side as well. He'll be he'll be fully fit and raring to go for this one, considering he obviously missed the final last year. So, like, when you think about it, like, when Limerick get going, I don't see how Kilkenny will be able to contain them. Because the thing about Limerick as well is that physically, they're just such a strong, tough team. Like, when Kilkenny are playing Clare, and you've got the Kilkenny defence in there of Tommy Walsh, or, the half-back line of David Blanchfield, Richie Reid, Paddy Deegan, and you've got, the Clare forwards of Tony Kelly, like, trying to break through the lines. Like those Kilkenny lads are dishing out heavy hits, heavy challenges. And a few of the Clare lads would go down, but these Limerick lads don't go down. They just power through them, and they find a way to will through them and create chances. And yeah, I think Limerick ultimately will be too strong. The worry as well from a Kilkenny perspective is that they were so good in the final last year and it wasn't enough. Are they able to produce a performance like that again? Do you know what I mean? Because they were so good last year. Like, can they do it again? And even if they do it again, is it still going to be enough?
That's it. Like, that All-Ireland final last year that Kilkenny had was as good an All-Ireland final performance as I've seen from a losing team. Like, Tipperary 2014 would have been right up there in terms of that they didn't win the first game. But it was like that went to the replay. But yeah, your point is that they somehow didn't win even though they played that good. And can they get to that level again? Who knows? Can Limerick get to that level again? Because I was talking to Gaelic Statsman Matthew Hurley, obviously, we were talking about the Munster hurling final this year. And he was saying, like, Limerick probably deserved more credit last year for beating that Clare team than they do this year, because Clare played much better last year in the Munster final and Limerick still beat them. So was it a case of, would Clare's performance last year have beaten Limerick in this year's Munster final? Like, it's, a whole different debate on its own. The reality is every game is different, and the performance on the day is all you've got to go off. And can they go better than they did last year? It's so hard to call, but I am going to go with Limerick. I just feel like right now, everything that I've said, the fact that they survived the Munster Championship when Tipperary had them on the ropes, the fact that they then came back to win the Munster Championship, like, the confidence they would have got from that was unshakable. And as we said, that was a champagne performance in the All-Ireland semi-final against Galway, where everything just clicked. It all looked like it was all coming together, and I think it's coming together for 4 in a row. Look, Kilkenny are great, a fantastic team, and they've had a fantastic year, but I think I would be hugely surprised if they managed to stop Limerick. And I don't mean that in any sort of a disrespectful way, but it's just Limerick are that good. They are that good.
They are, yeah. Like, it's just like from a Kilkenny, and like, I think another thing as well is that, like, you see when with teams a lot of the time, I think Clare, it's happened with Clare against Limerick, it's happened with Galway against Limerick in some ways, because of the fact that Limerick have such a stranglehold on the All-Ireland and the Munster Championship at the minute as well. Like, when it's going down the final stretch, and you've seen it a couple of times in the Munster Championship in some round robin games, the Tipperary and Waterford games, I think both stand out. I think some teams nearly panic, like, even when they have Limerick on the ropes and they go 1 or 2 points up, or they're 1 or 2 points down. It's almost like that thing of collectively, a lot of the lads are probably thinking, like, we have them here. We have them on the ropes. Like, we have a chance to actually go and beat Limerick. And like, that sort of, I suppose, want at the same time can actually, do bad things, because then you can start thinking immorally or
that's it. You mentioned Ferguson
bad
earlier.
Decisions on the field,
For sure. And you mentioned Ferguson earlier. Ferguson said a famous quote. He said, the fact that we're called Manchester United gets us 12 points a season.
Yeah.
These teams panic when they're ahead.
Yeah.
I completely agree with you. Like, that's happened. 100% it has happened.
Yeah, and it does, and it happens with all the best teams. Like it's happened with Dublin down the years and Leinster. Like the game against Kildare this year was a perfect example. It's happened with when they were in the 6 in a row. It's happened with Kilkenny, Kerry, Manchester City now. If you want to use another soccer example, like it does happen. And teams do panic because it's such a it's such a big thing to win an All-Ireland, but such a big thing to beat a team that are so good and been so dominant for so long, because everyone wants to be the team to like, you've seen the scenes when Mayo beat Dublin and ended their 6 in a row. You've seen the scenes when Tipperary stopped Kilkenny doing 5 in a row. It means more because when you've had to endure, pain and suffering from a team who've beaten you time and time again. And I know Limerick have, to be fair, it's 1-1 if you look past the last 4 years in terms of championship meetings. But Limerick have been so dominant in the last 6 years. Like what? They've won 4 All-Irelands in the last 5 years, and this would be 5 in the last 6. So it would mean so much. And I think when something means so much, you can lose the run of yourself ever so slightly. And that could be the difference. At the same time, look, teams can stand up in those moments and take it. And this Kilkenny side probably are more than capable than anyone of doing so. But at the same time, that could play an impact, like in the melting pot, where Limerick deliver, could Kilkenny falter,
Exactly, man. And it's actually like, I've always looked at it and thought All Ireland's where you beat the champions must be more satisfying. Like they must be, because you've taken out especially dominant champions. Like for example, Meath beating Dublin in the ladies' final in 2021. Like you beat the best team. You beat the team that were going for 5 in a row. Undisputed, you are the best team in Ireland. Like for example, Tip, as you said, beating Kilkenny in 2010. You beat the top dogs. Someone else didn't take them out for you, and then you beat the team that took them out. Like, for example, if it was a straight knockout, Munster and Leinster, and Clare had taken Limerick out, and then Kilkenny beat Clare, they didn't beat Limerick. And in my opinion, to be the best, you have to beat the best, and Limerick are the best. So if Kilkenny can beat them, wow, what an All-Ireland that would be.
Yeah, like and emotionally as well, I think it takes so much out of you. Like, and it's probably no coincidence. Like, obviously, Kerry beat the Dublin footballers last year, but like when you look through, when Mayo have beaten Dublin in the championship and semi-finals, they've still gone on to lost the final. Do you know what I mean? And emotionally, it takes so much out of you when you beat a big team and you finally get that voodoo, because you've been through a lot in terms of sport, in terms, like, especially for Clare, losing that Munster final, coming so close, losing big games against Limerick, and then they beat them in the round robin, and it's such a huge let off of emotion, and it's such a great feeling. Do you know what I mean? Like, such a brilliant feeling, like, for the team and everything else, and it can spur you on, but it can also go the other way as well. And I think there's plenty of examples of that. And could that have been fueling Limerick last year? The fact they got beat by Kilkenny in 2019. It's an interesting one, but you look at the age demographic of both players as well. Like, this is like Limerick Kilkenny, I think, is going to be the two top sides for a couple of years. And like, Limerick might get the better of them this coming Sunday, but Kilkenny could easily come back and be there again next year. Like, when you look at the underage, like, these two met each other in an under-20 All-Ireland final last year as well. A lot of those lads will probably feature in this final. Like, Billy Drennan might be there for Kilkenny. So, like, either sets of these two, like, are definitely not going anywhere anytime soon.
Yeah, without doubt. So Limerick is our prediction to be All-Ireland Hurling Champions for 2023. If you've just joined us, we're predicting them to do their 4 in a row. Now, we do have other fixtures that are happening over the weekend. We are going to run through those, namely 2 Camogie semi-finals and the ladies football relegation final decider. So starting with the 2 Camogie semi-finals, both of them, and how much rubbing salt into the wounds is this? Kilkenny were knocked out of the Camogie Championship a couple of weekends ago by Cork. Now the Camogie semi-finals are going to be played in Nolan Park, Kilkenny's backyard. And the team that beat them is going to be strutting their stuff against Galway. So the first game that is going to take place on the Saturday is between Tipperary and Waterford. Now, at the very beginning of the year, when we were doing the previews and we were starting to talk about the opening games, myself and Matthew both said that, and Matthew like put this stat, which is crazy. Cork, Galway, and Kilkenny. We always knew that those three were running Camogie and have been for the last 10 years. But you didn't realize just how much they have been. This year, Aaron, is the first year since 2012 that one of the three is not in the semi-finals. That's how much dominance they've had. Now, at the beginning of the year, myself and Matthew picked if any team was going to break that top three, break that triangle, and get in and disrupt the status quo, it was going to be one of these two teams. And they lock horns in Nolan Park this Saturday. What do you make of this game?
Yeah, it's going to be extremely interesting. And I think there's a lot obviously on the line, like what you said. Like, I mean, Cork, Kilkenny and Galway, like they've been the front runners. I think there hasn't been another winner other than them three in the last 15 years or something of that nature, or something along the lines or something like that. So, like, I mean, they've been so dominant, those three sides. So the fact that it's so much on the line here for Waterford and Tipperary, like, and to be fair to Tipperary, like they've done really well this year. Obviously, coming through the group, winning their group, putting Antrim away in the way that they did. And I think they've been a bit of a rising team in many ways. I think Waterford are coming in good form as well, and I think it's going to be really interesting. Like, it's a huge game, so much on the line for either for both sets of players and everything else. But I think Tipperary probably just the front runners in my opinion.
Do you think that has anything to do with the Munster final between the two teams? Obviously, Waterford took out Cork, which was a huge result. I didn't see that one coming. But then for Tipperary to beat Waterford quite comfortably. And I thought one thing that day was there's two obvious threats that Waterford have. Beth Carton and Niamh Rocket. They're the two obvious ones that you need to stop. Now, one player that I've been hugely impressed by throughout this championship has been Mairead Evanston. Thought that the job she did on Denise Gall against Kilkenny was unbelievable. And she did a fantastic job on Roisin McCormack against Antrim. She'll pick up one of them. That's a key thing for me in beating Waterford. And then down at the other end, they're going to be led by the likes of Koch Devan, Emer McGrath, Emer Heffernan again. And I do agree with you. I think having watched the Munster Championship, Tip did win comfortably. Waterford have the ability to blow teams away. They have the forwards to do it, but it probably still would shade it to Tip.
Yeah, I think so as well. Like, and I think the big one for Waterford is how you stop Cotavan. Like, I mean, she scored 2-2 the last day from play. Like, she's in flying form at the moment. So, yeah, like I think Tipperary. Like, I think for Waterford, it's been a tremendous year to get to this stage, to get to the semi-finals. As you said before, like that result versus Cork very much shook up the feel around the Camogie Championship. It was certainly a result not many people expected, but I just think Tipperary are coming in far too strong. They won the group, obviously, as you said, got the better of Waterford in the Munster final, and comfortably, put aside Antrim. Maybe you could say Cork are coming in without, Tipperary are coming in without a huge test, having comfortably brushed Antrim aside. But I think Tipperary have been building towards this all year, and yeah, I think they're not just going in to the semi-final to get to the final. I think they're serious contenders to win it as well.
Well, like that's the thing, you can always tell when it's different, when teams have their goals set further, because when they were interviewing Court Devan at the end of that game, player of the match, deservingly so, the goal she scored where she batted it over was unbelievable. And she didn't look like she was delighted to be in an All-Ireland semi-final. She was like, no, we're going for more. Like, they had their eyes set on more this year. And I think that they actually will. I think that they're going to beat Waterford and get into the Camogie final. Now, on top of that, we have this one as well. I mean, what a cracking game we're in for here. Cork versus Galway, the All-Ireland Camogie final. Interestingly, it's the same pairing that faced off in the 2021, All-Ireland Camogie final. Galway got the victory that day. Cork actually haven't won it for a few years. Now, I actually have picked Cork to win the whole thing, so I think my prediction is already kind of taken for granted. But that being said, Cork were very impressive against Galway and against Kilkenny, the goals that they scored, class. And Mackey, her one in particular, Katrina Mackey, brilliant finish. Amy O'Connor, Maeve Cahalan, at the back, Orla Cahalane going forward, and Aisling Thompson back in the squad as well. And now they've got the likes of Hannah Looney, Libby Coppinger that can just focus on the Camogie this weekend. They don't need to worry about playing football until next weekend. And I think it's no coincidence that since they've done that, Cork have put in their best performances of the year in both Camogie and football. Like, do you get what I mean?
Yeah.
These key players are able to focus on one and not both. I think they're hitting their stride now. Galway will give them one hell of a test, though.
Yeah, and it's been an interesting one. Like, obviously, as I was saying, like I probably haven't watched as much Camogie as I would have liked, obviously with the amount of things that are happening in the GA across the board. But from when I have seen Cork and when I've kept an eye on them, like they've been a very inconsistent team. Like they obviously lost to Galway in the group stages, as you said before. Like they got beat by Waterford and Munster, but then they turned over Kilkenny very much against the odds. And Amy O'Connor has been in sensational form. Obviously, getting Libby Coppinger back in the side as well. Like she obviously doesn't have to focus on the football now for this weekend. So Cork are coming in strong, but Galway, like Galway, like we're very good in the group. Like they won all 3 matches. And they're going to take a serious beating as well. But like Cork have had a very up and down season, and they're probably one of those sides that when they play at Kilkenny, they're probably nearly better suited to playing a Galway than a Tipperary or a Waterford, because they seem to raise their levels when they play, one of the big hitters. And I think maybe that could possibly stand to them this weekend.
Yeah, for sure. And like you are completely correct in saying that Galway on the flip side have been perfect in the group and they have done their stuff. It's just something about it that I don't see the same firepower that I've seen in previous years. And I just think Cork look like they're on it. I think that the Kilkenny performance was one where I felt like they turned a corner. Look, they did wobble towards the end. Denise Gall hitting that quick 1-1. They did wobble, but they managed to get over the line in the end. And so I am going to predict them to get through. Are you thinking Galway or are you thinking Cork?
It's a hard one really to know. Like I think, like again, I probably haven't seen a huge amount of Galway, but as you said, like that Cork Kilkenny game, like that does stick in your head. Obviously, turning over Kilkenny in the way that they did in the performance that they produced. I'll probably go with Cork, maybe ever so slightly, just by a point or two. I know Galway beat them in the group, but maybe Cork are just coming into a run of steam. And to be fair, they've been, I think they're gunning for Galway ever so slightly. So yeah, we'll go with Galway, or Cork by a point.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely buzzing for that game as well. Definitely going to be one to keep an eye on. Now, this one will be brief. It's not a situation that any county wants to end up in, but it is a very important game for both of these counties going forward in the football championship. So we do have some football preview. Cavan versus Waterford in Credit Yard. So this is the relegation decider from the ladies' senior football championship. Now, I'm surprised that Waterford have ended up in this position, to be honest. I did predict them to beat Tipperary. They lost to them on free kicks, but they struck me throughout this year as being a relatively well-structured side with some brilliant forwards. The likes of Lauren McGregor seems to score a goal in every game that she plays. I expected them to get the better at Tip. They didn't. They're in this position now. Can they get the better at Cavan?
Yeah, you'd expect that they could. Yeah, it's an interesting one for Waterford because I think they were 3rd or 4th were they in the league. They had a very good league season, I remember. So yeah, it's been a strange one for Waterford. Like obviously, it just hasn't gone too well, and I think between them and Cavan, like you would expect them to get the better. Like they were in a very difficult group alongside Cork and Kerry, like in fairness, and probably two of the better sides in the country. So I'd fancy Waterford.
Yeah, no, I'm going to say Waterford as well to preserve their senior status for next season. But yeah, that is the full preview of the weekend's action. Nearly got muddled up in my words there. So we have said Limerick to retain their All-Ireland Hurling Title. We're predicting a Camogie final of Cork versus Tipperary. And we are also previewing that Waterford will maintain their senior football status for next season. Thanks very much to Aaron for coming on today for this episode. Thank you so much as well to you, the viewers, for giving us your time today. And until the next one, guys, here on Cluiche with me, Seamus Brady, take care.